Welcome to this first Global Circuit Exchange conversation. A couple of years ago, EI started our international program, Global Podcast, Circuit Podcast. And a few months ago, we had a discussion with a few CEOs, and it became clear that having a Global Circuit Podcast was great, but it was only audio. And we decided, well, we're going to have to go visual. So today's our first Global Circuit Exchange in which we actually have a face-to-face conversation with a global CEO of an important utility. Calvin, welcome to EI Global Electrification Forum.
Lawrence, thank you. So you're basically telling me I'm a guinea pig.
Well, you're the first.
All right. So
we have actually two coming after you, but no, really, it's a pleasure having you here.
Good to be here.
And for me, it's really an honor to have this conversation with a real true leader in the industry. So just getting into the conversation, starting off first, tell the audience about the Exelon Corporation, what you guys do when you were started, where you operate.
So first off, again, in all seriousness, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And good morning to everyone. And it's good to be with you. You know, Exelon, you think about it, we're a relatively young company. You know, we're 23 years old, all in, but really only a year under this new iteration of who we are. So back in 2000, Exelon was formed with the combination of Unicom, which was the Commonwealth Edison utility out of Chicago, Illinois, and all of our nuclear plants and part of our trading business, and with combination with Pico Electric out of Philadelphia. Those two formed in 2000 to create Exelon. And along this journey, we've had many iterations of who we are. We acquired Constellation Energy back in 2012, which consisted of a couple of Calvert Cliffs nuclear plants, as well as the trading business, as well as Baltimore Gas and Electric utility. That was 2012. And in 2016, we acquired Pepco Holdings, which consists of Pepco, of course, serving the local utility, serving the nation's capital, Atlantic City Electric out of New Jersey, and Delmarva Power and Light out of Wilmington, Delaware. Now, Exelon is at that point this combination of 6 utilities, largest nuclear operator in the United States, and a retail selling energy business. And then a little bit over a year ago, we decided to split our businesses, the regulated businesses, our utilities, and our unregulated business, the trading and the generation part of the business. We decided to split those two. And on February 2nd, 2022, actually February 2nd, 2022. It's amazing how much happens in a year, right? Mm-hmm. We became Exelon standalone and Constellation Energy. So today, we're the largest transmission and distribution utility by customer count, having the responsibility and the privilege to serve over 10 million customers along the Mid-Atlantic and in Illinois. And, you know, in Constellation Energy is its own publicly traded business, trading, and both are doing well.
Well, interesting. So one of the things that fascinated me as I was doing my research, as I always do before these conversations, is to try to sort of learn the organization and see how they're evolving in the media. And one of the things I discovered about Exelon that you guys were recently named Fortune's most admired companies. You know, and what Fortune does, they use criteria such as the management, the products, the kinds of services. Now, what does that kind of a ranking, what does it do for you as the leader, but also for your employees? What does it do to your morale?
Well, I hope, first off, thank you. I hope that my employees take great pride in that. Mm-hmm. I always say that, we distribute electricity and gas, but what makes Exelon special, it's over 19,000 employees. Okay. And when you talk about a ranking like that, it goes to the intentional management and purpose of who we are and the alignment across our business. I always say we don't get everything right, but the intent and focus is always there of powering a cleaner and brighter future for our customers and communities. And how we lean in at Exelon is intentional and very different. So I think our employees, both non-management and alike, take great pride in that recognition and know it's an evolving journey that we have to stay on top of, because companies are evolving. Who we are yesterday to who we are today is very different, but the fundamentals remain the same.
Okay.
And how we lead and how we engage must continue to evolve.
Interesting. So as we're framing the idea of the global circuit exchange, I got the sort of epiphany of how do you make this exchange meaningful for the CEO? And I said the best way to do it is to push them a little bit into different areas.
I appreciate that. All right. Yeah.
But I want to go to one thing I know is very dear to your heart. And let's talk about some of the changes in society. I mean, the Me Too movement meant a lot in the US. I think what was most interesting was this whole issue around the killing of George Floyd. That brought about this issue of diversity, equity, inclusion to the forefront for corporations in the US and around the world. And obviously, Exelon, you guys make a lot of investments. I think $13 billion last year in your supply chain. Tell us why this is important for Calvin Butler and why it's important for all of us as corporate leaders to pay attention to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's a great question, but I'll frame it this, because there's a lot in there, and I want to make sure I capture this. And I'll be honest with this room and those who are watching. Today was a tough day, not because I was looking forward to this, but I knew one of the things you wanted to talk about was DEI. And as much as what transpired around George Floyd, you listen to some of the things that are happening in the news over the last 24 to 48 hours. The young 16-year-old who was shot through a door as he was trying to pick up his younger brothers. Those things continue, as an African-American leader, continue to impact me personally, not even thinking about how it impacts my leaders across my business or the communities that we serve. So for me, and I say this, I'm blessed to have taken over the position of CEO at Exelon, where my predecessor, Chris Crane, who you guys awarded with a wonderful award last night, I think it's a wonderful acknowledgement of him and the foundation that he has set. And I will tell you, Chris, through his years of leadership of a decade at Exelon, created a foundation of DEI is very important to who we are. As I always say, Chris believed in DEI. I lived diversity, equity, and inclusion. So shame on me if I don't bring those experiences every day to how I lead and how I sit in this chair. My job is to take how we engage in our communities to a whole nother level. So a couple of examples. We're leading the industry in our investment with minority and women-owned businesses. 39% of our total supply spend are spent with MWBEs, over $2.8 billion. That's significant. And we were doing that pre-George Floyd. So for us, every one of my companies know this is important, because we recognize when you invest in businesses that are in the community, and when you look at the communities that we serve, we need to be a part of it. That's one. The creation of the Racial Equity Capital Fund, because when you understand what your customers and your communities need, you then sit back and understand how do you go about meeting that need. So when you look at a city like Washington, D.C., when you look at cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, Chicago, one of the things that you know is that access to capital is an impediment for businesses to grow. So we put up $36 million of our own funds, partnered with an investment firm, Rock Creek, right here in DC, to manage the fund to invest equity investments and loans to minority businesses. When you look at our workforce development programs, all of those things are centered around how do we engage deeper and broader in the communities that we serve. We bring DEI to life, and we make it a reality for our customers, and we demonstrate that by saying we understand what's important to you because you've told us, but how we show up matters.
Calvin, you talked about community several times in your response, and you live in Baltimore. You're very active in the community. So what can a CEO, we have a lot of CEOs in this room from different parts of the world, what can a CEO do to impact the community? And on a personal note, I guess I was going to push you a little, what distinguishes Calvin Butler from other CEOs?
I think it's the responsibility of the CEO, and all of you in this room would know this, is to set a tone. because others will focus or will derive what's important by what you do, not just what you say, but what you do and how you go about living your life and leading the business. So volunteering is important to me. Engaging in the community is important to me. You know, it's been said many times that people don't really remember what you say or what you do. They remember how you make them feel. And how we show up as a utility company is important, because we can't just pick up and move, nor should we think about that. So how we engage is different. What's important to me, you know, we always try to understand our purpose. You know, it's a big thing now. People always say, what is your why, right? What I try to convey to people, and what I do convey to people, is that getting this job is important, but what I do with it is more important. We will deliver electricity and gas at the most reliable, safety, customer satisfaction, financial returns. We will do that. That's what we've all had a job and we've been hired to do. But the impact on our communities, more importantly, young people, giving them opportunities that others may have never had, is what we will be remembered by. Because this is what I know. As I stepped in for Chris, someone's going to step in for me. But what am I going to do in this chair while I have the opportunity? And I want all of you, when you think of Exelon, think about how Exelon engages differently, is one of the world-class T&D companies in the industry. Financial results unparalleled, continued growth, customer satisfaction, but more importantly, they made a difference in every community that they serve. That's what I want us to be remembered by.
Interesting. You talked about Chris and you talked about stepping in for Chris. So let's go back to the day you got the news that you're going to be replacing Chris. You know, the first Black president and CEO of Exelon. And talk about how it felt. You know, the awareness that you're about to take on such a responsibility. How did you prepare yourself, both mentally, spiritually, and physically? I mean, physically, I see you look good, so that's fine. I think you were well prepared. So,
first off, and it was humbling. You know, when Chris and the board called, it was humbling. And I say this, first thing I did is, for those of you who don't know, I ran our utility business for 3 years prior to the ascension of CEO of Exelon. And what's great about it, I have a wonderful team. I tell you, as a leader, you're only as good as the people you surround yourself with. And the first thing I did is I got on a conference call, all of the CEOs of each of the utilities, so 4 of them, and I told them, thank you. I said that my elevation is recognition of all of your hard work each and every day and delivering on the results. And then they congratulated me, and then I said, okay, let's go. You know, because it was one of those things. And, you know, those who know me well were like, hey, man, how does it feel? And it didn't feel any different, Lawrence. And then when everybody kept asking me, I started wondering if I was missing something, you know, because you do what you do. And you put wonderful people in place, and you ensure that you as a leader set clear expectations of what's going on, and then let them do their job. And we hold each other accountable to each other to achieve it. So I've been very fortunate and blessed to surround myself with talented people, and we continue to focus on what our priorities are as a company. So the call was important, was humbling, but it was no different.
When you got the call, did you at any point think back to the 10-year-old Calvin Butler ever imagining himself getting that call? Was it something you even dreamt of when you were growing up, that you would get such a call?
Man, I wanted to be a professional baseball player.
Why didn't you?
Because I wasn't talented enough. It was, I'll be honest, I grew up in North St. Louis. So I didn't begin thinking this was a reality until much later in life. And then I had people along the way invest in me in this journey. And, so for those of you in this room don't know, what was very interesting, my we all have mentors, right? People who have looked out. My very first one was, I was a student at Bradley University. Bob Vietz, who CEO of Silcorp, Central Illinois Light Company. He was president. He was chairman of the board of Bradley University. I was president of the student body. I got to know him that way. I interned for him. Out of law school, my first job was with his company, and he and his wife became my mentors. And to think 25 years later, I'm leading a utility company, and I tell you, it started with him. It started with him because he saw something in me, invested time in me. For those of you who may know him, he's retired, long retired. He was a man of few words, but high expectations. And it was one of those things where providing opportunity and stretching me beyond what I thought I could do, and then me seeing him in that seat is when I started thinking about, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And seeing how he went about his business and so forth was encouraging. And it was really my 10-year-old self, to your direct question, never imagined it because I never knew anyone like that at that age, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I say to you, going back to your earlier question, when young people are exposed, they dream bigger than they ever had. And you and I have talked about your international footprint, the programs. I believe that is so important for our young people as well, because as they get exposed to not just their neighborhood, their country, the world, they start dreaming much bigger than they ever have. And therefore, they can accomplish anything. And that's what's so encouraging about what we're doing.
Yeah, when you just said this, it reminded me of something my deceased father used to tell me, that every step you take, remember the step you took before.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about just the preparation and being ready for taking on this role, I know I'm supposed to be asking you the question, but this is an exchange. And so you just push something into me.
I'm just rolling with you.
Yeah, you just push something in me that I want to just emphasize here, because my 10-year-old, Lawrence himself, growing up in Liberia, didn't ever imagine I would be sitting on the stage interviewing another African American, a person of African descent, leading a multi-billion-dollar company. So in a sense, you kind of did a little switch on me here, because you brought this sort of you forced me to reflect on my 10-year-old self. So let me get back to my job to ask you questions.
But we have to take those moments to reflect.
Yes,
because that's when we know, it's those moments of reflection when we know we can impact others much greater, because we recognize where we come from and what we have to do.
Exactly.
And so, man, let's stay there.
Okay, we'll stay there.
All right.
Let's talk about influencing others.
Right.
And so I know you're also very active in Kappa Alpha Psi.
Yeah.
I did my research.
My brother David over there.
I understand who's still alive. But let's talk about how you're inspiring young people in the community.
Yeah. So I tell this story. And when I was in law school in St. Louis, and this goes directly to your question, but I always like to tell a story because it illuminates the why. I was finished up my first year in law school, and I had an opportunity, as you know, summer clerks, you volunteer, you get in the community, the lawyers like to get you out. And we were doing this with young men, young boys specifically, over in East St. Louis on a Saturday morning. And young associates are taking you over there, and you're taking them at this point. Some of you may remember Chuck E. Cheese, little pizza place, toys, and so forth. And we're picking these young men up when you were still allowed to pick, people up and take them for volunteer activities. And I'm with a young associate who had this red sports car. And this little 7-8-year-old boy was like, I'm getting in the car with them. And so if you remember these little sports cars, the back seat really didn't exist. They had it there, but it really didn't. And this little boy got in the back, and the music's going and so forth. And you try to engage with him and have a conversation. So I turned down the radio and I said, hey, your name? And he's telling you. I said, so tell me about yourself. And he's telling, I said, so, all right, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, I want to hang out. And I figured he didn't understand the question. So I said, no, what do you want to do? He goes, I want to hang out. And it hit me, Lawrence. The people that he respected and admired from his neighborhood, what he saw them doing on a daily basis were hanging out on the corner. That was his aspiration. He may have not have known anything about what that person was doing, but he knew they were cool and they had money in their pocket. So when you asked that young man at 7 or 8 what he wanted to do, and he said, I want to hang out, that hit me to my core. And I said, okay, I didn't know what I was going to be doing after my first year of law school. I knew I was going to get my law degree. I knew I was going to be successful. But I said, I was going to take my success, every opportunity I got, and ensure that young men like that were exposed to something greater than that street corner.
Yeah.
So they could dream bigger than what they see every day in their neighborhood. So when you talk about my involvement with Cap Alpha Psi, where we talk about achievement at its highest levels, I think part of that, a big part of that, is exposing other generations, young people, to thinking that they can achieve far greater than where they grew up. And that little boy impacted me far more than he probably ever knew because of that statement. Because I saw myself in him, because I was the first one in my family to graduate from college. How dare I think about law school? But along the way, I was exposed to different things and made me dream bigger and bigger. So that's the how and the why.
So we're going to be wrapping up here soon, but I want to move to innovation. And let's just talk about this whole energy transition that we're going through. What's your view on how industry is adopting technology today in terms of just all the new stuff that's coming out there? And, just talk a little bit about some of the innovation projects at Exelon.
Yeah, so it's an exciting time to be in this industry. As we talk about it, it's a multi-decade transition, meaning that for us and the jurisdictions that we serve urban, rural, and coastal. So all of our customers are impacted and will be impacted differently by this transition. And how we innovate is core, because what I always say is we can't leave any of those communities behind in this transition. But we're very clear that we're going to be a part of the transition because our voice matters in this debate. For if nothing else, our scale, but also where we serve. The challenge is, as technology continues to evolve, our desire to move to this decarbonized environment, to clean up the climate, to electrify transportation, we will adopt technologies that sometimes may be the most expensive. So therefore, you will have large gaps as to the who has and is able, and to others. What I also think a challenge is that from a regulatory regime, all the billions of dollars that are being put into the market by the federal government and the aggressive natures of our jurisdictions and other states, is that a lot of times the ambitions don't match the actions. And what I mean by that is that we have very clear and aggressive ambitions, but we're still in many cases operating with a 20-year-old or longer regulatory regime. And you can't get there doing the same things that you've always done. So that is where our opportunity and challenge lie. So for Exelon, we continue to push our jurisdictions, but because we don't own any generation, we have a different voice because we lead with the customer. And I can give you examples of why that has been powerful, because what regulators and legislators a lot of times don't understand or appreciate, I'll say that, is the cost of this transition. And when you provide them information like, look, I'm an electric and gas provider. I'm going to benefit if you electrify or if you take it slow. So let me just give you the facts. And as policymakers, you make the decision and we'll make it happen. When you provide them with neutral facts, it's amazing how they say, okay, let's have a measured approach. We're not going to slow it down necessarily, but let's be very measured about the how. And that's the exciting part. And when you also then wrap it around the equity component, that's when you can really have powerful discussions. And it's a pleasure to be, because we're never going to be that utility. We've made very clear, we're not going to say no. We're going to be the utility that empowers and say, how are we going to get it done, and let's work together. And that's been very powerful in each of our jurisdictions to date.
It's interesting you say that, because yesterday when Chris was having his conversation with Jake Rival, the CEO of Manitoba Hydro, he made that very point about change and how you have to be persistent and not saying no to the transition, but leaning in.
That's right.
We have about 6 or 7 minutes left here. Let's just go back to Calvin Butler.
Sure, you don't want to talk about innovation?
No, I'm done. I want to go back to Calvin Butler, but I want to talk about Calvin Butler from the standpoint of most leaders in the world today are talking about work-life balance. This big thing about work-life balance. So now you're very busy, and now you're running this big multi-billion-dollar company, but you're also involved in the community. I see you on LinkedIn a lot because I follow you on LinkedIn, so I track what you do on LinkedIn as well. So how do you balance life with work? How do you do it?
First off, I have a very patient wife. But like anything, you prioritize the things that are important. And I'm 120 so days into the job. And with any new job, you're running hard and you're trying to get your sea legs, right? And right now, as I was talking to others, is that my calendar's controlling me right now. And what I mean by that is that everything's a first, and you have to engage differently until you understand, okay, what's important, what's not, how you engage. And it's going to be that way for a while. And my wife and I, we have that discussion. She goes, I've been here before. I said, absolutely. But then you also have to make time for yourself, right? Because I don't think you're good to anybody if you're not getting a decent level of rest. I'll never say it's the appropriate level, but a decent level of rest. And that means getting the workouts in and in ways you can enjoy it. And it's been a while since a vacation, but I'll take a day or two here to decompress. For my recreation, I enjoy playing a good round of golf. Well, let me just reframe that. I don't play a round of golf. Good is relative. But I do enjoy getting out. And, when you're traveling to here and there, finding time to read. For me, to take a moment to feed myself on reading and just having that moment is important. But you make sure you carve out time for your family, because through all of this, I've seen many leaders be at the top of their game. And when it's all said and done, you need to have your health, you need to have your loved ones, and you need to be able to just maintain, who you are in this process. So that's the journey I'm on. Some days it's better than others. Some weeks it's better than others. But I think everything goes through a cycle. And you just being cognizant of where you are on that cycle so you don't go too far is very important.
What I find interesting is when you were telling me about the conversation with your wife, you said everything is a first. Right. And so you're the first in the chair for the global exchange. Right. So I didn't design this. Somebody else did. So you're first here, too. But look, to wrap up, Calvin, I want us to sort of look forward into the future. So let's go to 2050. What kind of world do you imagine us living in? I mean, given what just happened, the shooting that took place, and you ask yourself, are we looking forward 20 years or looking backwards? But let's try and look forward 20 years, or maybe 20 years. So by the year 2050, talk about what kind of world you imagine we'll be living in. And then what concerns you about that world, but also on the positive side, what excites you about it?
So let me start with what excites me, because, I am a glass half full person, and so I'll say that because when you have an opportunity to engage with this generation coming up, it's exciting because how they think, how they engage, some of their priorities. The news will make you think that it's a bunch that doesn't want to work, doesn't have purpose, but when I have an opportunity to talk to these young people at universities and high schools, they're very engaged. They're very excited, but they're about purpose. They're about, are you making a difference? And they want to work for companies like that. So for me, that's what excites me, because this next generation has a higher level of accountability to social purpose than maybe mine. All right. So having said that, as a leader, how do I attract those young people to work for Exelon and keep them engaged so this is a place that they can see their future? That's one. What also excites me is that we're talking about I'll use a quote from Michael Regan, who the U.S. EPA administrator. He says, for the first time in history, EPA has walk around money, right? So, we're putting money into the issues that we've been talking about for a decade or more that are important. Cleaning up our environment, a recognition that climate change is real. And what are we going to do as Americans and the world to change that, to change the trajectory that we're on? That's exciting. So where do I see ourselves? I see ourselves as a nation and as a world coming together to combat one of the most global pandemics that we have in climate change and making an impact in that journey. Because you follow the money. You're investing money into things that you say are important. And I think companies like Exelon and the others in this room are saying this is important to us. So I'm excited about that. What our challenge is that we're living in an environment where people want to talk about the differences a lot more than they want to talk about the similarities. And I do believe because of that, we spend much more time debating how we're different than saying where we have things in common and working to get things done. And that's the part that discourages me.
Well, Calvin, it's been a pleasure having you part of the Global Circuit Exchange, and I wish you all the best in your new role, so to speak. I just want to ask you one final question.
Okay.
What would you like to do for fun if you had a chance to travel the world? This is the Global Electrification Forum. You have people from so many countries in this audience. And if you were to pick one country to visit, be careful what you choose, but I'll let you do it anyway. Where would you love to go? I'm not going to send you there, but I just want to help you set it up that I can start planting the seeds so when you get there, you can be given the VIP treatment. So where one country in the world you want to visit that will, be a nice place to go and relax?
Africa. I would love to, and my wife and I have been talking about this a while, but then every time we get ready to plan it, I get a job. So to really walk through and visit the different countries there and to feel the essence of the people, to see where Nelson Mandela was housed in prison, right? To just have that experience and talk to people across the continent about who they are and so forth. That would be special for me.
Well, now I have the job that makes you do it. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Please.
Thank
Calvin
you.
Butler.
Thank you.